Welcome, everyone. So this will be a 1 hour session today. Today, we have two wonderful presenters who many of you know. They've been with us numerous times. We have Samantha Duggan. Samantha is a behavioral psychologist, author, speaker, and recovery advocate based in the UK. Her clinical training, long-term recovery, and spiritual journey have converged in her work at the intersection of psychology, faith, and family life. Her latest book, Channels of Peace: How Science and Faith Can Transform Your Family, is an honest and deeply personal account of how psychology and faith meet in the ordinary and sometimes chaotic reality of family life. And also with us is Tian Dayton. And of course, many of you know Tian very well. She's been with us numerous times also. And Tian is a clinical psychologist, psychodramatist, and senior fellow at the Meadows. She is the author of over 15 books. She is one of the world's leading voices in relational trauma, adult children of addiction, and the intergenerational transmission of family dysfunction. Her most recent book, Growing Up with Addiction: How Adult Children of Addicts Can Heal Family Trauma, CPTSD, and Codependency, is widely regarded as a landmark contribution to the field. And she is also the author of the ACOA Trauma Syndrome, Emotional Sobriety, and the Soulful Journey of Recovery. So we'll get started. And let me tell you first, a few months ago, Samantha sent me the outline for a workshop series that she's bringing to us in July on repairing the parent-child relationship in recovery. And the parent in recovery trying to figure out how to make things right with their children, or the adult child trying to figure out the amends process, forgiveness of self and others, and of course, anybody in 12-step recovery dealing with steps 8 and 9. And I was thinking about who might bring something really rich to this conversation. And of course, Tian came to mind immediately. Her work on what growing up with addiction and trauma does to us through her model, RTR, Relational Trauma Repair, felt like it belonged right alongside this discussion with Samantha. Not only two people working professionally in this territory, but but also with the lived experience in this area as well. So thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Tian, for agreeing to do this. It's great to have you with us. And so I'll start with you, Samantha. And the whole idea for this conversation, of course, came from you when you sent me the outline for the July workshops. There was a piece that you had written in there, and so I'll read it, your words. So you said, many people in recovery carry unresolved pain, regret, confusion, or longing in relation to their children or their parents. Often we know something was damaged, but we are unsure how to approach repair without causing further harm. And I wonder if we could start there in you going through, opening up that and unpacking that for us a little bit.
Sure, and thank you for having this chance to have a conversation about this. I'm really interested to see where it goes. I think I would credit Matea actually with the idea for this workshop, because when I was talking to you guys before, Matea put forward the idea that she'd quite like to hear something on rupture and repair and family relationships. And so I was thinking about it, and I think I would separate probably the amends that are due when we're in recovery down the line, and then the amends uh, up the line, not up the line, the amends we often long for. So I think there are two distinct parts to that sentence, and yeah, we might have the opportunity to look at both of them over the course of this conversation where it goes. But I think, you know, I'm aware as well that we're not going to be talking fully theoretically here. We're going to be talking a little bit more personally, perhaps. But I think the answer to both, whether it's down the line person in recovery to their children, or the person in recovery hoping for something up the line, Amends is often tricky because you mentioned 8 and 9, and good amends, the kind of amends that can potentially lead to reconciliation, requires 1 to 7 beforehand. And I think as well, there's a tendency in recovery to oversimplify. And when we flatten or oversimplify things as well, um, that's when it can not lead to the hoped for outcome. So, if you oversimplify amends into, well, it's saying sorry, and I've said sorry, so why don't I have the relationship I hope for? Well, uh, that's an oversimplification. Amends is not just saying sorry. It starts long before that. For example, you have to understand what you did that you're saying sorry for, just as an example, just as one way that means that amends can go wrong. So if you haven't done the work to understand what you're making amends for, that would be another way that it won't go the way you might hope for. And yeah, so I would start there. Is that,
Yeah,
that a good place
yeah,
to
very
stop
good.
and pass to Tian?
Yeah, I think so. Over to you, Tian
I
Dayton.
love the way you're framing this. It's so compassionate from both ends. It's so intelligent. And I have two stories just burst into my brain. One was I was asked in my 30s, which is now 40 years ago, to or maybe my 40s, to redo a program, right? So it was a 5-day family program. I went there to spend the week watching it before I wanted to touch it. And something was in front of my eyes that I will never forget, can never forget. And that was a psychodrama with the person who had become a sober addict in just the dilemma you're talking about. So I was not directing anything. This was not my drama I was witnessing. And they said, "What do you want to say to your parents?" And she just was rip-roaringly angry still. And, you screwed me up, you this, and, a lot of anger pouring out and wished for amends, but stuck in the anger or marooned in it at the moment. And then she turned to the chair representing her daughter, right? So this was a 90-degree, 180-degree turn, that's all, not 360. And she was kind of falling apart in front of her daughter, saying, I don't know what to say. And two therapists rushed into her because the daughter was acting out and in treatment in the same facility. And they said, remember your 3 C's. Remember, and they just drummed into her head what to say, which you don't do in psychodrama, give lines. And she looked at it and she said, I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. Right? And I thought that is
Right.
the biggest disconnect I've seen in action for a long time. If your parents caused your problem, but you didn't cause your children's, how does that add up? And so find some kind of uh, intelligent middle ground, which is you're talking about the initial steps and the initial work and the working with the attachment trauma and the cognitive distortions that are all getting passed along if they're unconscious and medicated if somebody's using if the parent was using a substance at the time the child was being raised. So I really admire you working with this very complicated subject, and I want to go anywhere you want to go.
Yeah. What you've said there, Tian, is it's very timely actually, and this is the complicated subject. I see that all the time. That's the tension that people try to hold. And I'm actually delivering a talk on Friday in London at UCASAD, which I'm calling the parenting mirror. Well, actually, I'm presenting what I call the parenting mirror in a talk about called What Recovery Teaches Us About Parenting. And my thesis is that that is unsustainable and that the life that people so long for, freedom, joy, the full array of their feelings, a life that's happy, joyous, and free, as the promise of recovery puts it, it doesn't work if you keep maintaining on this side, they harmed me so terribly, but
Mhm.
I didn't do any damage here. And so I have it in, I present it as a three-way mirror. You remember when I was a girl, we all had those three-way mirrors, the
Oh,
big
yeah.
one in the middle and the two on the side, and you could see what you were doing with your hair at the back. Yeah, yeah. So one of those, I call it the parenting mirror. On one side, you have the prosecutor, on the other side, you have the defender, and in the middle is the repairer. And the prosecution position is that angry one that you saw in the psychodrama. My parents harmed me so terribly.
Mhm.
And the defender is my parents were great people. They did nothing wrong. My childhood was happy, and ultimately
So you
recovery,
polarize those two roles going
right,
historical. Okay.
right, yes. And I think whichever standard you apply to your parents becomes the standard you ultimately apply to yourself
Mhm. Mhm.
if you are a parent. And
Interesting.
I see the goal of recovery as more and more looking in the middle mirror, which is, my parents were flawed, but human, like I am flawed
Mhm.
and human. And I may hurt my children, but I can go back in and repair. So,
There's this one thing about, I think you'd love psychodrama because, or what I love is that you can, what I see, Samantha, and I can't believe you don't see the exact same thing, is people want to talk to the parent they have, and that conversation just doesn't happen the way they want to have it. So in psychodrama, I sometimes will say, choose someone to play your parent, right? That you would like this amends from, and where would you like to put them in the room so they can watch as you do your work, right? And then what you end up doing is choose someone to play your parent at the age where the damage was done, and you
yeah.
play yourself at that age. So on the
Mm,
stage, you can talk to the right person at the right place at the right time. And that provides a lot of healing, and it also embeds the idea that that was then and this is now, and if I can't have this conversation with my relationship today with my parent, I can still heal. I can still get
yes.
angry at the parent I had then. I can still pout and do all of the things I really need to do to get past this, but it doesn't
Absolutely.
necessarily work to do it with them.
Right. In fact, unless your own parents have undergone a journey of healing as well, we can say with, probably a great degree of certainty that it won't work to do it with them. You will go
Yes.
back in, say your piece, and they'll do what they do, and
Yeah.
you come
Yes.
away with it again, right? Yeah, so that's why things like psychodrama are so helpful for people for resolving this. And
Hmm.
I had another little step. So, my own personal journey, I've been trying more and more each year to look through the central mirror rather than
Hmm.
either
Yes.
of the other two. So
Yeah.
in my early recovery, I was very angry at my parents. I was still in the blame paradigm. But that set me up. That set me up for the trap of collapsing with shame anytime I did anything wrong with my own children.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
right, right,
oh, I'm going to listen to that again for the recording. That's a,
right.
that's an
Yeah,
important thing to say.
yeah. And so every time I did a step 10 to go, what went wrong there in my interaction with one of my children, and I would discover some fears, I would discover maybe some unreasonable expectations, or maybe some reasonable expectations, but that I haven't set the boundary clearly, or I don't know how to do it, or whatever. But over time, it began to get twigged to the fact that this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being way too harsh on myself, and
Hmm.
it's non-productive.
Hmm.
And so as my compassion for myself grew, and I still kept applying that, recovery commitment to honesty and truth, I
Hmm.
found naturally I had to apply it up the line. Otherwise, I was being dishonest. And it's
Uh-huh.
You get that? And it's just been a journey that's gone on from there, walking in it. It's not easy, it's not easy, but I took another step forward last week. Um, my daughter had a birthday. And I have young adult children. She's now turned 20, so no teenagers even. And my son is 22 and just moved out of home to get his, first proper job. And on her birthday, I woke feeling like a little sadness.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what is that? And immediately you're like, oh my goodness, it's for my son rather than my daughter, even though it's her birthday. Why? What's going on? I see her more because she's still in university and she cycles in and out of home. And so I have enough connection with her. But I realize there's a mismatch between my desire for connection with my son and how much I actually connect with him at the moment because his last few visits home, I wasn't home. So I checked in with that and I'm like, oh, look at that. And then all of a sudden, just like that, I took a
Right.
step forward in compassion towards my mother,
Mhm.
right? Because my mom will take me hostage. I call it, she takes me hostage. She loves me to sit in her kitchen when I visit in Ireland. I live in England. She lives in Ireland. I visit, I'm in her house. She likes nothing more than to have me to herself for that whole time. And I don't like it, you know? But in that moment, I understood that it's her dysfunctional strategy for having sufficient connection with me, her beloved daughter. And now here I am longing for more connection with my beloved son. And so that was yet another example that it just works like that. The peace comes when you're honest in both directions. I would put it like that.
As from the point of view of the adult child, the one who was, kind of dropped like a hot potato with dad's drunkenness and mom's incredible preoccupation and really dissociative way of being not around. I don't know where I'm going exactly. I want to talk about role training and letting yourself, if you're a child like me, have the experience you never got and may never get. And it happened this way. There was this thing called the caper my mother did with some friends, and it was sort of a funky spa, taking over a little raggedy motel and having uh, masseuse and swim and exercise. And it was kind of wonderful. First of all, she brought my oldest daughter, sister, who she felt safe with. And then she added my other sister and I, who she felt less safe with. And mother's narcissism really meant that if she had an audience, she could parent.
Interesting. Yeah.
And if she didn't, and then she would be really cold and hurtful to me. So that's a tough one to come back from. And if you're an ACA, the way I did it was just say, okay, she may not deserve a forgiveness, but I deserve to feel the love that's going cold inside of me. And the way that manifested was that we were all piled on a bus to go on some tour. And my mother came rushing in like a, divine angel on the bus saying, Tiani, you forgot your lunch. You forgot your lunch. And I saw myself in my mind wanting to stand up and point in rage to let everybody know this is not the woman who raised me. This is not my mother. What she is showing you is a sham. My mother didn't give me 35 cents for a school lunch. She didn't feed me. And I'm from privilege. She could, but she just didn't. There was food in the refrigerator. I could cook it or not, and not much food. So I thought at that moment, okay, this is my choice. Do I want to live with this arm like this? Or do I want to let myself? And I decided I'm going to let myself have the mother I always wished I had, even if it's kind of I know it's a sham. I'm going to see what it would feel like to have this lovely
Okay.
attention she's giving me when she can have an audience. And so
Yeah.
for 5 days a year, for the remainder of the years we went there, I let my mother love me in public. And I just let
Okay.
it feel good. And
Yeah.
And it grew to feel good. And I will have to say, in the last 5 years of my mother's life, she stopped. I think she got just old enough to forget she didn't like me. And she suddenly just loved me. And who knew how? I mean, I think I made room for it too, but she felt it genuinely. And she had a caregiver at that point who was saying, look at this. Tian is the one who takes care of you the most, where you turn around and
Right.
appreciate it. And so I thank God that I had that vision to let in what I needed and gave up the retaliation, the need for it, because it was more important to me to give myself the opportunity to love my mother. I needed it so badly, even if
Right.
you see, okay, there it is.
That's such a great story. And I'm so interested as well in the fact that it began with your commitment and then your mother did what she always did,
Yes,
public, but you received it really differently, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. That's so fascinating. And I see in that as well. And two things. I'm thinking of multiple stories
yes,
which one
yes.
to go to. My own sponsor nursed her mother for the last few years of her life. And in the dementia, she also had that same idea that she forgot she was really angry and poked rows with everyone she met, and she was dearly loved in the nursing home where she ended her life. And my sponsor had gone through almost 5 years of no contact as part of her long
Yeah.
journey of recovery, and one of the things she always said to herself and passed on to me is always interact with your mother or father, with your parents, with you at their funeral in mind. Do it for you at
Wow.
their, which I think is a great
Smart,
little, isn't
smart,
that
really
works
smart with
works
their
for me.
shorthand.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And the other story I was thinking of is another move that happened over the course of my recovery. So, I'm Irish, and almost everybody from Ireland when I was growing up there is baptized Catholic, but I grew up in basically an atheist home, and my father, angry atheist. My mom had a quiet, invisible faith, I now realize, but I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, fast forward to my children's first Holy Communion. And I cannot enjoy the day at all because I'm obsessed with the fact that my father has come and he's standing in the pew beside me in his suit. He's shown up in his suit and he doesn't say any of the prayers. He doesn't sing any of the hymns. He doesn't go up for Holy Communion. He's motionless and mute. And I am livid. I'm just livid inside. I know a lot of people don't like that language, but I really am feeling, poor me, look at this rubbish
Mm,
father that I
mm,
have.
mm,
And I got there by a different route. I didn't use that tool of allow myself to have the parent I want or that I need. But I did eventually come to realize that, wow, the turnaround for that for me is my father comes. He
yeah.
comes. He might not
Mm,
participate or be exactly how I want him to be, but he comes. And so when I recently took my parents to a jazz concert in Dublin, and my dad is sitting, the first thing he shared was, did you hear the mistake the trumpeter made after the number? Yeah. And he used to be a trumpeter. So, I'm like, okay. And it's happening again. I'm getting really cross because my dad does not appear to be enjoying the music
mm,
and he's motionless. My mom's having a great time. You know,
mm,
but my dad is like still. And I go back to the first Holy Communion place. I'm like just livid with what he's not doing. And then I suppose I got hold of myself. And what you said about how about I try to bring the love that I so desire.
mhm,
Yeah. And at the end of it, I turned to my dad and we were starting to get into what did you think? And I allowed myself to say, you know what? It was just music. There was no jazz singer. And I said, yeah, I prefer it with a singer as well. Everything dropped. All the defenses dropped. And all of a sudden, my dad and I are connecting on the fact that we prefer a jazz band with a singer than a jazz band without a singer. But it began with that step of, not falling into the trap of prosecutor.
Do you know, may I ask you, are your parents married still?
Yes.
Ah, so, yeah, I mean, you're saying something kind of profound, I think. It's so hard that, I mean, what we work with, I'm guessing you do as well, is this frozen trauma, right? This immobilized pain that can only, if you can't penetrate it and process it and come out somewhere else, all you can do is react and defend and go. What I always see the trauma dance is as the extremes. You can either be your things, the defender or the prosecutor, or you can be uh, hyperactivated and shut down. You can, the behavior, the feeling, everything follows the frozenness. And
Mm.
wrote a book called Emotional Sobriety 20 years ago. It still
I read it.
really sells. Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
But
when I was
that
a young
it,
mom.
I realized at the time, it's 4, 5, and 6 is where the action is. And I didn't even understand trauma that as well, nearly as well as I do today. But the we go from 0 to 10 and 10 to 0 with no speed bumps in between. And we everything that hits our defensive system or our frozenness gets up to 0 and then we get relief from the high pitch by shutting down. That's how we
Mm.
so rather than find 4, 5, and 6 which is it seems dull, but it actually expands. That's where the everything is alive, where you can think and feel at the same time.
That's right. Yeah,
I,
that's
oh, I
so
have
right.
one really dumb story that'll take 2 seconds. But when
Go, I want to hear
when
it.
mom turned, I think it was 50, she was married to my really wonderful stepfather, Walt. It might have been 60. And Walt said, we should give your mom a party. So I kind of said, "Oh, okay." And we rented we did all the thing, flowers. And we're Greek Americans, so we're like a family network. And I put the word out and thought, what will make this fun? Because everything can be a little tense. It can be, not with my extended family, but with my personal. So I said, everybody just dress up as mom. Everybody just dress up as mom. And and my family's kind of zany and a lot of fun. So, and my daughter, my son were dressed up as mom. I mean, I wore this, leopard hat and big glasses, and one of her red dresses, my other sister came in, one of her dresses from her honeymoon. But my other sister, the third girl, came dressed up in a karate outfit
Right.
with slogans all over it. Like, because that's
Okay.
how mom went to Al-Anon. But whenever we'd try to
Ah,
say a genuine feeling, she'd just say, "I'm sorry you feel that way." Or she'd pull out a slogan. So Becca went around the full evening going, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "Keep it simple." It was just hilarious. And
what did your mom make of it?
my mother I mean, she has a wonderfully funny sense of humor, and she can laugh at herself in public. In
Right.
public. Had it been in private, we would have, heard about it. But we know her too, and Becca knows that in public she'll get away with it. Uh, so I don't know why that's your story is bringing that to me, but it is you were able to get yourself out of that stuck place with such a simple. But what did that simplicity do? It allowed energy to open. It allowed connection
Right.
to happen. What do you think it did?
Yeah, I think it gave my dad a lifeline.
Oh.
I think it found common ground between us. So
Mhm.
actually, if I was really honest, he was sitting there doing his thing, and actually the truth of what was going on inside me was that I was finding the jazz a little more boring than I was admitting, because
Mhm.
I didn't. I would not normally share that with my father. I wouldn't because why wouldn't I share it with him?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just because various different reasons. I bought the tickets and picked the concert, so I wouldn't want to admit something negative
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to hear that he hadn't enjoyed it. Perhaps old me couldn't have tolerated that he couldn't enjoy it, but this
Mhm.
me that I am now just took the risk and said something true, and
Yeah.
I think that
Hmm.
shifts the energy, what you said, it shifts the energy because, you know, your mom, you're describing her as a lady who's been to Al-Anon and who has the slogans, but they're not embodied.
Not at all.
You can tell.
Uh,
Right.
But
Yeah. So I think
you sort of took charge. I mean, it strikes me that you took charge of a situation that he was kind of locked into one of those frigid spots. But you showed the maturity he wasn't capable of in a way, maybe.
right. Yeah. Or didn't I mean, one thing, the older I get as I get as well, I think sometimes people just don't know how to do it. One
Yeah.
of my more recent things that I've been trying with my mom in the last few years is she says something
Hmm.
that I don't like. Like, oh, it's well for you. Patrick
Hmm.
might know that one, it's like, and I say
What
something
does it
like,
mean? What does it mean?
right. So what it means is, oh my goodness, it's a little knock, a dig,
Yeah.
right? So if I said it's like, oh, it's going to be 35 degrees here on Wednesday, apparently, and she like, oh, it's well for you, and aren't you lucky living in a hot country or so, I
Hmm.
don't,
Yeah. I get it. I get it and I got it all over the
right,
place.
right.
Yeah.
So when she says these little things that are always little digs, I've started to say to her, what do you mean?
Hmm.
Right?
Mm.
And the first time I did it, she said she went quiet and she looked a little rabbit in headlights. And she said, I don't know. And I took the risk to believe her, right? I took the risk to believe
You
her. I
look
think
at
my
look at the emojis. Everybody's laughing
right,
and applauding and hearting you.
right,
So
right.
many people understand this.
Yeah. And I think then what happened was, when because one of the things I'm practicing as well is, I've learned over recovery to not bombard my
Mm.
parents,
Mm.
but I examined it later and I'm like, what on earth is that? And I think her I don't knows made me realize that actually she's just repeating slogans.
Yeah. Hmm.
She grew up in Ireland. She heard the slogans. Somebody says something. I think they talk about tall poppy syndrome in places like Australia. We didn't have that expression in Ireland, but
Oh yes.
we definitely cut down tall poppies,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
you say anything that comes across as a little tall
Hmm.
poppy, and they will just cut you down.
Hmm.
But she doesn't actually mean it. She's repeating the slogans, and they're not embodied, I don't think. Well, sometimes they are, sometimes they are, but and that's been helpful for me in I realize now I've moved into speaking about the longing, the up the line longing,
Hmm. It's
it's
very
like,
clear when you say it.
yeah. So and that is so much improvement, because like you talked about the frozen grief,
Mm.
and I'll tell her maybe a story about when I found a whole bunch of frozen grief around my mother. So my husband and I married 25 years ago yesterday, but not in a Catholic church. Thank you. Yeah, not in a Catholic church. And many years later, when we returned to faith through recovery and decided to practice as Catholics again, because that is that's the native tongue of our
Hmm.
spirituality, and we had a lot of spiritual awakenings and so forth. And we wanted to get married again in the Catholic Church. And so I didn't invite my mother, which meant I wouldn't invite my dad, my sister, so we kind of did it in secret. It
Hmm.
wasn't secret. Anyway, my daughter ended up letting the cat out of the bag at my dad's 80th birthday. You know the way God always conspires to
Hmm.
push you forward. But so on the morning of this, it's called a convalidation. Um, I'm trying to do my zip up. And my sponsor is going to arrive shortly to help me. And my daughter is little, so she's a flower girl. And I've been very low key about it with all of my friends, just because I am low key and I'm navigating this tension of I'm doing this thing and I haven't invited my parents and how is that going to go? And now they've found out about it. And oh, anyway, when I couldn't reach my zip, and then the flowers arrived and they were wrong. They were too rich in color. And just that act of trying to reach my zip. Anyway, I put a hole in the dam, or the frozen grief got a little bit too close to the fire, and all of a sudden the dam broke, the emotion unfroze, and I'm in pools of tears, like snot crying with
Mhm.
the felt emotion of not having the mom I long for in that moment. And I remember one part of my brain is just sobbing, and the other part of my brain is going, I can't believe it. Really? Seriously, God? Like 20 minutes before I'm driving, like my mascara,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then I just, I felt it. I let it go. I picked myself up, redid the eye makeup, and went to the church. And that was another piece of the step forward
Mhm.
that allowed for better rupture and it's because we're talking about amends and rupture and repair and improving the parent-child relationship, but each one of those steps that I took allowed me to improve in both directions. That is my experience. It always goes in tandem, I have found. So I
Mhm.
don't know.
I mean, I think that, because I'm 76, I've been in the field for a long time. And at one point, I realized that without grief, you couldn't really heal. And yet, grief was at that time, it was the Kubler-Ross model. It was grief at the point of death. And she really adapted Bowlby's stages of loss without really saying they were Bowlby's stages of loss. But it was beautiful, transformative work. But no one talked about grief in life. And I thought I'd need to do a book on grief for my people, so everybody's going to know that the kind of crying you did is has to be part of recovery. So
Right, right.
I was in New York City at the time. There was so little material on grief. I'd have to go to the library, write on these little pieces of paper requests, like of the 3 or 4 books, go down a dumbwaiter. They sent up maybe the ones that they had. It took 45 minutes just to get them back. And then I would spend the day taking notes, and then I had to leave them and return them back, come back again. It didn't take that long because there were only 4 books to read, but one of them happened to be really thick, Therese Rambo. Other than that, there was almost nothing there. And I sent that one book. I've never gotten so many rejection letters in my life
Uh,
for a book. All these sweet ones. I'm a fan of Dr. Dayton's work, but we just don't have room in our spring, or we find that words with grief, about books on grief don't sell, and all these very sweet, polite ways of saying no. And Health Communications did publish it. And then soon on, grief started in life started getting more acceptable. I did programs on grief. I had one at Karen. I've got one at the Meadows, and they they always fill up. The ones in grief and anger always fill up. But and I feel the same about forgiveness, by the way, but
mm,
that's not that's an old concept.
yeah,
And that people have accepted, but people weren't. I was in my 40s. I must have been when I
right,
wrote that. And nobody thought it was okay to grieve anything
right.
except at death, so that people like me held profound grief, because it's much more complicated loss to lose your parent a day at a time. It's a
Right.
much more painful
Oh,
loss.
oh my
It's
goodness. That's yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
a good
my
way
dad
of
just
putting it.
died a
Right.
little in front of my eyes, day after day after
Mm,
day. The father I knew
yeah.
was dead, and the father I remembered kept getting farther away. And
Mm,
when you take that kind of mourning into the rest of your life,
mm,
it's a mess. And somehow, I remember at one point sort of aligning with your story. My mom had, it was easier to grieve my dad because I had a better connection with him. Even drunk, I had a better connection with him. But
Mm,
mom did another one of her very cold, dismissive things, and I remember going into her little guest house where I was visiting her and realizing and just saying, stay with it, stay with it. And realizing I could hold I had a moment, it sounds really dramatic, but I felt I can hold my broken heart in my own two hands. I can hold it, I can cup it, I can honor it, and I can acknowledge that it's broken. It just
right.
was like shattered. And
Yeah.
then somehow in the acknowledging of it and the having it and holding it myself, I could move it into a different space. But I think, as we were talking about earlier, it really has been my decision to make my own recovery more important than revenge. And I always use the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us this day our daily bread. Um, Forgive us our trespasses. You know, no, first is give us this day our daily bread so we can survive, right? But
Right.
and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So without daily bread, we don't survive, but without spiritual bread, we don't survive.
Right. That's it.
We're
Yeah.
the walking wounded, walking dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, the way it's put in the Lord's Prayer is touching on what I'm saying here
Hmm.
as well, which is that it's just spiritual physics, it just appears to be the way it works,
Yeah,
and yeah, I had another idea as
great
well that
phrase.
I thought we can tie it right back into that kind of amends. Why do amends sometimes backfire? And I think if you don't realize what you've done, the amends can't work, and a certain amount of that grieving is essential for a decent amends. So if
Well,
people,
can you say more about that? Because the people listening will want to hear what you have to say just on that. That's where people
which
get
bit?
stuck. Well, that this acknowledgement is so, this is, I think, where we get stuck. If I don't get the acknowledgement from my parent that I long for, I can't complete the forgiveness process. So
Right,
what
yeah.
do you do
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah. I think first of all, I would say examine it.
Mm.
Is it really true? Is it really true that you
Ah,
can't move forward
yeah,
without
yeah,
getting the acknowledgement from your parent?
yeah,
Because I think you'll find if you're really honest that it's not I can't move forward. It's more of a won't.
yes,
I won't move forward. It
yes,
belongs to stuck.
yes.
Right. And
I'm with
believe
you.
me, I get it. I get it.
We, we all do.
right. I really get it. I get it because, yeah. So, for example, and just I discovered recently that a part of me had never grieved the loss of my first long home where I lived uh, for 10 years of my life, from sort of when I was about just turned 1 to 11.
Mm,
And I loved that home,
mhm,
but there was no room to acknowledge it as a loss
mm,
at all. But that was helpful then when I moved my children from a home in early recovery, and it was our first little recovery home, and we had a wonderful time there. But it was
mm,
rented, and then they were selling it for development, and we moved on. But because of what I'd learned, and I wasn't even fully aware, I gave my children the opportunity to grieve the loss of their home.
mhm,
So I think all of that backlog can clog us because it hurts, right? There's so many things we experience, maybe the loss of a home or, you know, really serious
mhm,
physical abuse. It still blows my mind that people are still being physically abused by their parents, but they are
mhm,
in this moment.
mhm.
So let me try. I've lost my thread a little and gone. So it's
The
back to,
home, the loss, the grieving, the
yeah. So it's a, I it's the connection between forgiveness and letting go of the desire for the parent that you wanted. You are right that your parent harmed you, hurt you deeply, but the freedom that you so desire is not possible without letting go of what they owe you and doing what it says in the Lord's Prayer of letting go of the job of prosecutor. You've got to hand the job of prosecutor over to somebody else, or you will stay
Oh,
stuck.
two
Mm.
two Bible, I mean, two things that guided me through this passage. One was vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. That if I can see somebody who's hurting me desperately and back up and say, give this to God, vengeance belongs to God, and God will wreak vengeance in ways I cannot imagine. And he will exact the exact proper dose. And I learned to do that with my brother. I could see what was going on. And then if you back up, you will watch God exact vengeance. And that is understanding a vengeful God, but the Bible tells us that is part of it. And the other was Christ on the cross. And forgive them for they know not what they do. I just worked with that phrase until I could understand it and what must Christ have meant. And I translated it in my mind to the unconsciousness of that it gave us
Yeah,
a path out, that they truly do not know what they do, that and the implication is in time they may. And
yeah,
how many millions of people have used Christ on the cross as both a path out and a path at. It's been
yeah,
used a million different ways, but for the spiritual seeker, he's pointing the
yeah.
way out of vengeance.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important as well to note we were just working with this. I've just got back from a week-long retreat, which is called Grief to Grace. And we do a meditation on Christ on the cross to help people better understand forgiveness and what it is and what it isn't.
How do you
And
how do you do that? Similar to this?
so we work with what we call living scriptures. So we read the relevant scripture passage, and then we use it's an Ignatian method of imaginative meditation and prayer on the passage. Ask people to imagine themselves in it. There's psychoeducation, psychodrama. It's a real mixed bag, but a key piece on that verse is Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. So Christ doesn't say, I forgive them. He says, Father, forgive them. So Christ also hands it over to God.
Oh, I've never pondered that.
Yeah, it's worth pondering. And I
Yeah.
think as well that vengeance piece, that's really, really tough thing to meditate on. But again, I would come back to this idea of spiritual physics that, you know,
Yes. Yes, exactly.
right,
Exactly. It has
that
nothing to do
it's
with you. Your job is
it's
to step back and give it to God.
give it to God. And then, anybody who's been trapped in addiction knows that, the addiction is its own cross.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a horrid way to live.
Yes.
So I think we could, yeah, but I find it very helpful. And I come back to a book club. So I have a Step 11 book club that I set up to help people better understand the Step 11 part and explore it. And we were gathered one night and talking about forgiveness as a result of whatever book we had read. And I shared that for me, forgiveness is about not exacting the price myself, but handing it over to God. And that with some big wounds, it was only possible to forgive because I have an understanding that God will sort it. He is the judge and jury, not me. And somebody around the table said that's not forgiveness. They thought it wasn't forgiveness because I was letting God do it rather than doing it myself. And I thought about that and I thought, okay, that's the way you see it. And we had a wonderful discussion, but afterwards I came to the conclusion, no, I'm going to stick with my one because there are some that are just so big. I can't do it. I can't do it. I have to
Put your
relinquish
faith
my
in something
right.
larger than yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Hand it to a power greater than myself.
Well, you know, you bring to mind, I did this book called Forgiving and Moving On, sort of early in my recovery because I recognized that I had to do it or I just couldn't get past here and I couldn't stop writing it. I couldn't stop. So it became a book. And my priest and we raised our children in New York, but we grew up in Minneapolis, and we had just the best priest you could wish for, Greek Orthodox priest. As a He baptized me, he used my baptismal name always, and he was just such a spiritual good man. And unbeknownst to me, my mother, I think, or somebody sent me the church bulletin, and he had published one of my pages in the church bulletin from that book. And it
Wow.
was we forgive if we are wise to free ourselves. I haven't even looked up but it's another angle at it, and they're all good angles, right?
Yeah.
But for me at that time, I was having to say it's more important for me to be free of this than to hold hatred around, So I was forgiving to free myself. Felt very
Right.
clear that this is for me. They may get it, they may not get it, they may benefit, they may not. And the hardest thing for me to get over was, what do they benefit from But then I had to kind of think, okay, there's some spiritual chemistry to that too. But you
Yeah.
don't know it at the time.
No, you don't. And that's why it takes trust, right?
Yeah.
It takes trust. And I recently spent 2 years meditating on trust because you're in recovery way longer than me, but I'm in a little while now, but I know that there's more of the journey to go. I want greater freedom, and to surrender deeply requires trust. So, and I pray and meditate on that, my husband and I, he's also in recovery, I often think, and we say to each other, I hope when the time comes and our children stand or sit in front of us and list the ways in which we harmed them, that we are able to receive it, and to give them what I longed for but have never received. And now over time I'm really coming to accept that it's probably not coming, and I don't need it. I don't require it. I can live happy and free without it. um I want it for myself. I want it for myself. And I think our mental health improves to the extent that we get ever more radically committed to reality. And so circling back to what we were saying, what about the person who says, I can't forgive? It's like, I say, interrogate it. Is it really true? Is it really true?
There are two things that are swirling around my mind. I love your interrogated, and I know with my own mother, one of the turning points was my father, I forgave every day, but my mother was harder for me. And I just went blank. You see what happens? I can't remember it. But I think was saying was that I didn't want to let her deprive me of the opportunity, the God-given opportunity I should have to love my mother, not to love her, but to love the person who was my
Right.
mother. And I
Yeah.
thought I just moved her over into an archetype because I had a grandmother
Right.
who totally understood her role as grandmother was not her. It was a role. And she played
Yeah.
it beautifully. My mother did not, my mother thought it was her. She thought everything was her. So she didn't play the role as an archetype, but I did in my mind.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I thought I deserve to love my mother, even her, and I
Yeah.
don't have to make it personal. I will
Right.
love, something like, and I, and at the end of the day, I gotta say I loved her. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what was the other? bit that seemed so relevant to what you were saying. It'll come back.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I do think we forgive in the way we forgive, and that oh, I know what it was. I am an ACA in recovery from being an ACA. And so I don't have the unconsciousness in the same way that I recognize that if you've been addicted to something, how you work that through with your children and how, but see, my own father was an addict and I still found him more available than my mother. So for me,
Yeah.
but anyway, my kids are now in their mid and late 40s. They have their own children, their own marriages. And I find when they have things they need to say to me, which they do at varying degrees, and this is when they get triggered, right? So they start to realize, hey, I wouldn't have done it the way my parents did it, and I'm having to work through this stuff because it's getting triggered in me. So I learned I don't know what they would say, but I learned to survive hearing it
Right.
and to just sit in the chair and listen. And I remember one time in the kitchen, just, shaking inside feeling
Mm.
my daughter's righteous anger. I knew she needed to say
Mm.
it. And I knew she was probably right. It doesn't matter if my husband and I are ACAs in crazy amounts of recovery. And we did so much better not passing it on than our siblings on both sides, I think. And I hope they're not listening. But that I do cut myself some slack, but I recognize that we got a lot of stuff not the way I would have liked to get it. And
Sure.
it's
Sure.
cost them. And they say, but they're so nice about just telling us and saying, look, it was not the, we didn't experience it that way. We experienced it as hard. We experienced you as we were so preoccupied with our pain and our past and our this and our that.
Yeah.
But I have found that uh, I don't know, but they're nice. They still seem to be able to stay in the game if we can listen when they need to say
That,
it.
that's a nice way of putting it. That's a nice way of putting
There's
it.
not a lot to say because you can't say
Yeah.
that didn't happen. You can't say you didn't experience it the way I wanted you to experience it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think give yourself some credit. You could,
Yeah,
you
I know.
know,
You're right. You're right.
you could.
Yeah.
And I think I see we're coming. Wow, it's flown by, hasn't it? That hour has flown by. What I'm hoping to do, as Patrick said it, in the workshops in July, 2 workshops, I'm hoping to give people the opportunity to actually do some of this work that we're talking about, to come maybe to a little bit of a better understanding, to take some time to see what might need to be unfrozen or whatever, because I think it's the same recovery principles apply to this issue as apply to any issue. It's just that nobody triggers us like our family, right? Nobody triggers us quite like our family.
I
Nobody
think,
triggers us quite like our family on that note, right?
yeah,
I mean, I
well,
would just say that what a gift your workshops must be to people anyway. Yeah.
wow, what wonderful chemistry between you
Yeah,
both.
no kidding. You knew there would be,
I
Patrick.
knew it. I knew it. Tian and Samantha said, "Well, you have some questions ready in case."
Yes,
You know,
we did. We have to tell
I
everybody.
know.
We both said, please
I'm an
come on,
event
guide this,
planner.
Patrick. And he said, you'll
Yeah,
be fine.
We
yeah.
did. We did. I don't think he did. Did he get a word in at all? I don't think a single.
I
It's okay. It's okay.
It's like
No,
he wound us up and then we went.
know. Sorry, we
being a
made you
good,
go to all that extra work.
yeah, well, being a good event planner, that's what I've spent my life doing. So I'm always ready for a contingency. So I had 27 questions ready.
Oh,
But
Patrick. Oh, that's
thank you both. I
Thanks,
just want to
Patrick.
say,
wonderful. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank
This was
you.
a wonderful